Okay, good morning. Okay, so we're going to look at part two of Rites of Passage. Please make sure that you've just gone back into Rites of Passage and had a refresher and had a read of it again, and made sure, please, your reading was completed before the lesson starts. Because there's lots of information, lots of knowledge there that you will need in the lesson. Okay, well, let's get started. We're going to look at wedding rites. We're going to look at weddings in different Christian traditions and how they perform it. And just immediately, there is a significant difference with how different Christians perform their weddings and the practices that occur. And again, the most important thing here is that you focus on the symbolism. Okay, as Christians perform practices, there are specific symbolic meanings and symbolic significances that all of the actions have. And it is really, really, really important to understand the symbolism behind the actions, because the actions are not empty in themselves. Taking, and we'll get into it in more detail, but just looking at this image we have here, looking at this idea of crowns, there is symbolism in that. This individual administering the Eucharist, there is symbolism in that. The kissing of the hand, there is symbolism in that. The wearing of the robe, there is symbolism in that. The kneeling at the altar, there is symbolism in that. The sign of the cross, there are symbolisms scattered all over these practices that we're going to look at. And so you just want to focus on, yes, these are the practices and this is what they do, because that's important. But what is the belief that's informing these practices? Because that's as important. To understand the reasons and the ideas and the concepts behind the practice is really, really important. All right, so first I just want you to have a look at this. This is a 15-mark question. And I'm going to ask you to, I guess, using the writing frame that I've given you, you can either use the checklist for this use the checklist and the exam criteria. Use both when you do this exercise. Have a look at this answer, an exam answer. And this isn't a full 15 mark. This is just part of a 15 mark that I've picked out. I've picked out parts to show you. This is not a full 15 mark. It's part of a 15 mark. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to just go through this using that writing frame, using that the criteria that I've sent you and the checklist that I've sent you. Highlight the strengths of this response. Highlight the bits that are strong. Annotate on this. Print it off and annotate on it. If you can't do it electronically, annotate on it. Highlight the strong parts of this response. Highlight the weak parts and the problems of this response. And I just want you to take about 5 to 10 minutes. Really, really take your time. Look for it. It's really, really important to do stuff like this because, look, if I show you a model answer and you go to me, wow, so that is excellent, that gets 15 marks. And I go to you, well, no, that's going to get 3 marks. You genuinely need to be concerned about the amount of knowledge you have and the security and confidence you have in writing an exam question. But if you're able to look at something like this and say, yeah, that's 15 marks, and I give it 15 marks as well, then actually that's brilliant because it means you know exactly what a response should entail and the knowledge it should have to, you know exactly the knowledge it needs to have, and also the skill and expertise and development. You know how to write it out. You know how to present your arguments. You know how to present alternative ideas. You know how to use the quotes. You know how to make the references. And actually, when you know how to do that a lot better, it guarantees you closer to securing the highest mark in your 15 mark questions. So pause the video, take 5 to 10 minutes, annotate it, take your time and really, really look at it. And I'm going to go through it with you in the next slide. Pause the video now. Okay, so looking at what we've got so far, I've highlighted some bits here And I haven't gone through the second part because I want you to spend some time looking at that. Just take your time and look at the bits that have been highlighted green and ask yourself a really important question. Can I understand why that bit says green, has been highlighted green? Can I understand why certain bits have been highlighted red? Certain bits have been highlighted yellow. The yellow parts are where it's not been done well. The green parts are where it's been done well. The red parts are where it's not been done at all. So just going through one of them, I won't go how they start off. We'll go straight to the middle. They go, this means that, marriage is a lifelong commitment. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. Now, that's a quote, Mark 10, verse 8. Many Christians believe that all these vows must be kept. And that if there are problems in the marriage, they should seek support, help and guidance from the Bible and the church, which have the authority in Christianity. Now, that last bit is excellent knowledge. Yes, you seek authority and guidance from the Bible, but you also seek guidance from the church, from the priest and the pastor who married you, because that's the role of the church in Catholicism. The church has authority. And the fact that that person remembered that and wrote that down is excellent. Christians believe that obeying the will of God is of utmost importance and that God wants people to marry and remain faithful in order to have children and bring them up in a Christian family. That is a key Christian teaching and an idea that the whole point, or one of the points of marriage, is to bring up children in a Christian environment, in a Christian home. That is key, and they understand that. It's not just about loving each other and doing whatever you want to do. No, there's a purpose to it. And actually that purpose has been exemplified in that response there. And then they go, some Christian and non-Christians may agree. Now, the reason why that's been highlighted in red, you should all be able to tell me that instantly. Who are the some Christians? Which specific denomination are you talking about? Who are the non-Christians? Why would you be writing about non-Christians when talking about wedding promises are unrealistic? And if you are going to write about non-Christians, who are you specifically referring to? Your answers need to be specific. Your references need to be specific. Let's look at the next red section. It says, also, it may be that the victims, that you are a victim of unfaithfulness or abuse, and you need to dissolve the marriage. Now, you don't need to dissolve the marriage. The word you're looking for, the subject-specific word, is absolve. You absolve the marriage. This is where a person gets married, and the priest in Catholicism wipes out the marriage covenant as though it had never happened. So they don't just break it or remove it, they absolve it. They absolutely remove it as though it had never happened. It also goes, also many believe that we have free will and that happiness is the most important thing, and that if we're not happy, we should do something about it. Well, what is do something about it? Put a gun to their head and shoot them. Like, that is so vague and unspecific. It's horrible. You cannot write stuff like that because that is not specific. That doesn't tell me anything. That doesn't tell anyone anything. So you cannot write responses like that in there. They go, also many believe. Who are the many? At the first one, it goes for rich or for poor, for sickness and health. They also promise to love and remain faithful till death do us part. Okay, so that's understandable. You're using references. What does the reference therefore infer? This infers, and this is what should be written at this point here. This means that for Christians, death is the only condition that they can be separated under, because they've made a covenant with God, and the covenant has to be kept and bound no matter what. The only condition that they are allowed to make or have a divorce or break the marriage is if there's been unfaithfulness in the marriage, and this was said by Jesus in his teaching in the New Testament. That's how you finish that paragraph really, really well, because your examiner is looking for expert knowledge, or as expert as possible. They're looking for really, really strong knowledge and really, really well structured, well thought articulation of the argument, of ideas, of references, using quotes properly, and finishing off sentences well. Not just leaving them as half sentences, but finishing them off well. And if we look at the second one in the third paragraph, the second yellow, many would believe that it's difficult to remain faithful because we are only human, not perfect. And we can be tempted by others. This may lead to the breaking of the vows of faithfulness, which may lead to a marriage, which may lead to a marriage. And okay, oh yeah, I'm a bit stuck. I think that should say divorce. But divorce. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's look at the first bit. It says, this is difficult to remain faithful because we are only human and not perfect. All right, so I get the idea of being human and not perfect. But what does that actually mean? What are you trying to say? What are you trying to... No one's perfect. So what point are you trying to highlight? Again, when you look at it, this might lead to the breaking of faithfulness. That may lead to a marriage breakup and divorce. Sorry, I misread the line above. That might lead to a marriage breakup and divorce. Also, it may be that you are the victim of unfaithfulness and you need to dissolve. Absolve the marriage. This is because Jesus gives the condition that unfaithfulness is the only condition you're allowed to absolve a marriage, and therefore they can do this because it is sanctioned and they're given authority to do it by Jesus. Also, many believed. So, who are the many? Become unfaithful. So the next one, become unfaithful and fall in love with someone else. That's a bit wishy-washy. How do you finish that sentence off properly? Because it feels unfinished. The last one, if they did this, I think that fewer marriages would end in divorce. Based on what? What are you basing that on? They would end in divorce. Why and where? So again, it's just thinking about how you make sure you finish off your sentences as well. Look at the strong ones. Look at the ones that are okay and need to be finished off better. And look at the phrases that are wrong. That last read, where it goes, if they did this, I think that. Remember, the examiner is not interested in what you think. At the beginning of that paragraph, I agree with. Examiner is not interested in what you specifically agree with. They are interested in the argument as a whole. So, you may say Protestants may agree with the idea that so and so forth. I think this is sound. You can say that, I guess. But, we don't really want to hear your opinion as much. We want to hear the quality of the argument you are presenting from different perspectives. You are answering the question, are Christian wedding promises unrealistic? You will not get marked down for your response, but you won't score marks for your response. It has to be a response that you are bringing to the table and showing that you know of, you're aware of, you've looked at, you understand it, and you can articulate the argument. Really, really important that it's not just your opinion. Your opinion isn't as important in this 15 mark. Your judgment is, and when you're doing a judgment and evaluation, and yes, you can use your opinion to inform that, but it shouldn't be based on just your opinion. It should be based on the argument that you have presented, and therefore the most logical and sensible conclusion based on the argument you've presented. Okay, let's move on. All right, so we're just going to look at a Catholic wedding ceremony. And there are two types of wedding ceremonies that occur in a Catholic marriage. One is where there is a Mass and the Eucharist is celebrated, and that lasts for roughly an hour. And then the other is where there is no Mass, and that normally takes about 20 minutes. So I just want you to spend 6 minutes, have a look at how the ceremony is performed, have a look at the things that occur, and again, just think about why they probably occur the way they occur. Pause the video now. Okay, so in thinking about this, when you've looked at these different practices, remember to keep asking yourself, well, I wonder what beliefs are informing these practices. I wonder what ideas, what teachings are informing these practices. So keep thinking that as we constantly go through the practices and we look at what they do. Let's think about why do they do what they do. All right, then we have a Church of England wedding ceremony, and this tends to be the same for Protestants. The service begins, the priest welcomes the congregation, and then reads out, ideas and teachings about what Christians believe about marriage. Then he makes the declaration, and it says, the couple shall make the promises in front of God that they will love, comfort, honor, and protect their partner as long as they live. And these are the specific vows they make, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do us part. Now, there is a lot in there, to have and to hold from this day forward. So, that's the idea that we're not going to get divorced in 24 minutes. or get divorced in 3 hours or 6 months, for better, for worse. So when things get really, really bad, well, what does that mean for this covenant that we're making? Well, if you get poor, what does that mean for this covenant we're making? Well, if you get sick and you get terminally ill or really, really ill, what does that mean for this covenant you're making? You know, these vows cover everything. So just have a good look through these vows. And again, look at the words that are said when the rings are exchanged. Have a look at the words that are said when the rings are exchanged. Because this is the basis of the covenant. You know, marriage is a covenant. And these words are the basis of this covenant. And a covenant is a promise that you make with someone. And in that promise, there is a criteria that you choose and you say, I will uphold. You've got to stick to that, because it's not just some words in Christianity, it is a covenant. Now, from what you know about the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, the Old Testament and the New Testament, covenants are to be taken incredibly, incredibly seriously. They are not trivial and they are not to be played with. They are to be understood, because there is weight on the covenant, because the covenant always involves God. Then you have the proclamation, okay? And then you have prayers, readings and sermons, and the signing of the register. Now we're just going to break this down a little bit and bit by bit. And I'm going to ask you to pause the video at each point to have a good read. Okay, pause the video here. Okay, so we understand the purpose why the declarations are made. You know, the priest has to declare it. Is there anyone in here that knows the reasons why these two may not be joined? Because, you know, committing bigamy is not allowed. You know, in Christian marriages, monogamy is absolutely essential. So if you're married to somebody else and you'll get married to somebody else again, that is bad. Then the vows are made. And it's a bit like I said earlier, it's about covenant. And covenants are to be taken seriously, because they're performed between a man, a woman, and before God. So there is weight there, there is spiritual weight there on this covenant. Pause the video. Okay, so looking at this covenant, there is symbolism. You know, there is symbolism present at the ceremony to highlight the act of the covenant. And so the rings are the outward sign that a covenant has been made. And traditionally, what would happen if somebody made a covenant with someone, they would have to spill blood. And I don't know if you've seen it in films where they open their hands, they get a knife and they cut their hands. And then they either drip the blood in somebody else's mouth, or the other person does the same thing and spills their blood, and then they shake hands. And so the blood mixes and the blood merges, and that is the bond of the covenant. It is the thing, the outward sign that shows that this person and this person has made a covenant. Now, I don't know if you've ever watched John Wick. You know, when John Wick, I think it's John Wick 3, someone makes a covenant with him, and he brings out this little sort of, it looks like a watch, and you know, on the watch is his thumbprint, but it's in blood, and that's because blood, you know, traditionally has been used to form covenants between two different types of people. So that's really, really key to understanding that the significance of covenant being made between a man and a woman and God. It's not just a physical covenant between them two, but God gets involved in the spiritual aspect of that covenant. And it's an eternal covenant, not just a personal one. Well, to death do them part. And then last but not least, just have a quick read through that. And these are just the things that happen to end the ceremony, which is a proclamation, which is prayers, which is reading of the sermon, which is the signing of the register. Signing of the register is really important because it makes it a legal document. So it's not just they're married in heaven or married to Jesus, but they're married factually in terms of the law and the government. Then you read the sermons. Again, that's to signify Jesus and the presence of God being present there. And obviously prayers as well. Okay, we're just going to do a quick recall quiz. I want you to take about 4 or 5 minutes. I want you to respond to these questions. Short extended write-in, please respond to these questions. Pause the video now. Okay, great. If you're back, here are the responses. I just want you to go through it. Again, just focus on the key phrases. You don't have to have the same word for word, but just make sure you focus on key phrases. So if we're talking about the difference between Catholic practice in baptism in Catholic and Orthodox traditions and Protestant traditions, here, babies, bringing them into the family of God, so that's a key idea. Catholics, sprinkling of the water is a key idea. Protestants, when a person is baptized, there is full immersion. Those are the key ideas coming through with Protestant, Orthodox and Catholic traditions. So I just want you to go through it, check your answers, make sure it's right, take notes if it's not, and go back and look at that knowledge again, because it probably needs to be secure. Okay, let's move on then. So I just want you to again, what we did before, have a look at these 3 images, and I just want you to annotate the images with the features of practices during a Catholic marriage, include the religious significance. You know, what's the significance of the rings? What's the significance of the cross? What's the significance of the Holy Book? What's the significance of the candles? Why are they there? How are they used? I want you to annotate the sheet, take down notes, write down every single aspect and feature that these items are involved in terms of a Catholic marriage ceremony. Just pause the video and do that now. Okay, now we've talked a lot about Catholic ceremonies. Well, let's look at Orthodox ceremonies. Because Orthodox ceremonies, again, Christian ceremonies, there are things that they do that are quite different. And, you know, you can see a few of them immediately just from looking at this, the pictures. You know, in the first picture here, we have the candle being represented, present. You know, in the second picture here, we have the crowns, which is really interesting. Then we've got the rings, and something specific happens with the rings. And then we have, obviously, the Mass that occurs. And again, in Orthodox traditions, you know, yes, they follow similar core fundamental ideas, but the way they execute these practices are very much different. Even in this last picture here, the way they go around and look at, and use this table is very fascinating. I want you to watch this video, start from 3 minutes, take notes on the different practices that occur during a Greek Orthodox ceremony. This is really important for you to remember, because when you're doing an exam question regarding ceremony, you won't be able to compare too much Catholic and Protestants, because they are quite similar except for the Mass. However, the Orthodox is significantly different. You know, the Orthodox a variation is probably the one you will talk about, because it is so different to the other two. So pause the video now at the point of 3. Pause the video now, watch from the point of 3, take notes, focusing on those specific bits I've highlighted. Pause the video now. Okay, we're back. Great. We've got a rapid mass feedback. It's just true or false, 1 to 10. Literally takes 60 seconds, 1 to 10, true or false. Go for it. Pause the video now. Okay, great. Here is the response. Go through that. Check that you've got it right. Bits that you haven't got right, go over it again. Go over the knowledge and secure that knowledge. And here we go. A question, exam question. The vows are the most important part of a wedding ceremony. Now, guys, that is a great question. That is an absolute brilliant question. There are huge amounts of things you can talk about. There is a possibility of going off course, but make sure you don't go off course. Make sure you stay focused on that question. What is the argument you're presenting? What's the conclusion? What arguments are you going to use to support? What arguments are you going to use against? Which traditions are you going to refer to? I want you to look at that, talk about it, talk about the significance. This is where the Orthodox tradition is probably going to be quite significant to be spoken about, because the Catholics and the Protestant one are quite similar, not exactly the same, but quite similar. The variation is with the Orthodox. Orthodox are very different in terms of their practices. So that's your question. Use the use the references I've sent you. Use the quotes from the reading logs. Use your reading logs to help you inform your response. Also, once you've finished writing your answer, use the checklist to check that you've got all the elements that the answer should have. Use the criteria to check that you've written as best of an answer as you can to fit within the 10 to 15 band. And then also, use the writing frame or use the sentence starters if you need to. Okay, brilliant. Well, guys, till next lesson, until next time, take care. Once you do the question, please make sure you send it to me, and I will see you next time. All right, that's part 2 done. Take care.